Welcome to Fam Fantasy, where transformation, elegance, and self-discovery come to life. I never expected a single piece of fabric to change the way I saw myself forever. It was late, the house was quiet, and I should have been asleep hours ago. But there it was, folded neatly on the edge of the laundry basket like it was waiting for me, my sister's pale pink satin slip. The faint glow from the hallway light brushed across it, making the silky folds look almost alive, whispering to me in a voice I couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. My chest tightened as I reached out. I told myself I was just moving it, just putting it back where it belonged. But when my fingertips brushed against the cool satin, it felt like a secret unlocking inside me, a fragile door creaking open in a hallway I hadn't dared to walk down before. I held it in my hands, my pulse hammering, torn between guilt and a strange, unexplainable pull. What unsettled me most wasn't the thought of being caught, but the storm of emotions inside. The slip was so delicate, so soft, so unlike anything I was supposed to be touching, let alone holding against me. And yet, I couldn't look away. My reflection in the darkened window stared back, a boy with uncertainty etched across his face, clutching a piece of clothing he wasn't meant to touch. But something in my eyes, something in the way I held it close, told a different story. In that silence, I realized this wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper. Like the fabric itself was wrapping around a hidden part of me, drawing it closer to the surface. I should have put it down. I should have turned away. But instead, I whispered a question to the empty room, my voice trembling even as the words escaped. What if this belongs to me too? The sound startled me, as if someone else had spoken, but it was mine, raw, shaky, yet alive in a way I hadn't heard before. I held my breath, waiting for some kind of answer. But the only reply was the soft rustle of satin in my hands, daring me to imagine more. And that was the night everything began. The slip lingered in my hands longer than it should have, and I found myself smoothing the fabric like it might reveal some hidden message if I touched it enough. My throat was dry. And the longer I stood there, the louder the pounding of my heart grew until I was sure it would wake the whole house. Every part of me screamed that this was dangerous, that I had no business being here in the hallway at midnight, holding something so forbidden. But the more I tried to place it back on the basket, the more it felt impossible to let go. My room was just a few steps away. I don't remember deciding to take it with me, but suddenly I was inside, the door closed softly behind me, and the satin was glowing faintly under the moonlight spilling through my blinds. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it like it was a secret I had no right to keep but couldn't resist. When I finally slipped it over my head, I expected disappointment. I expected to feel ridiculous, or ashamed, or like I was playing some silly, childish game. Instead, I felt the quietest sense of belonging I had ever known. The satin brushed against my skin like it had been waiting to meet me all along, and the moment it settled, the room felt different, warmer, brighter, more alive. I looked at myself in the mirror on the closet door, and though I still saw the outline of a boy, there was something else there, faint but undeniable. The way the fabric clung to me softened the edges of my frame, made me notice the curve of my shoulders, the way my hands traced the hem with surprising tenderness. My eyes lingered on details I'd never cared about before. The line of my neck, the fall of my hair over my forehead, the softness that had always been there but hidden under layers of who I thought I had to be. A strange mixture of fear and relief swelled inside me. Fear, because I knew this was a secret I couldn't explain if someone found out. Relief, because for once I wasn't pretending. I wasn't performing the version of myself I showed the world every day. I was just me. And the strangest part was how natural that felt. But as the fabric whispered across my skin, a voice in my head cut through the moment, sharp and merciless. What are you doing? What will they think if they ever see you like this? The thought wrapped around me tighter than the satin did, but I couldn't take it off. Not yet. Not when I finally felt like I had stepped into a story that had been waiting for me all along. That night, I fell asleep in the slip, my dreams filled with shifting reflections of myself, some I recognized, others I didn't, all asking the same silent question I wasn't ready to answer. Who am I really? Morning light is cruel when it has to wake you from a secret. I opened my eyes slowly, and for a moment, I didn't remember. The satin against my skin was the first reminder, soft and undeniable, wrapping around me like a confession I hadn't meant to keep. My breath caught, and panic rushed in before I even sat up. What if someone came into my room? What if my sister noticed the slip was missing? My thoughts tripped over each other as I pulled it off in a hurry, folding it back into the neatest square I could manage, as though the fabric itself might testify against me if it looked out of place. I stuffed it under my pillow for a moment, heart hammering, then tucked it carefully beneath a pile of clothes in my drawer. But even as I hid it, my hands hesitated, lingering on the satin like it might vanish if I didn't hold on just a second longer. There was no denying it now, I wanted it close. The rest of the morning moved in fragments. The clatter of dishes in the kitchen. My sister humming to herself as if nothing had shifted in the world at all. The smell of toast and coffee that should have grounded me but only made me feel like I was floating 2 feet above reality. Every time I caught sight of her, my chest tightened with guilt. She had no idea her slip had been borrowed, transformed into something more than fabric, into a mirror I hadn't known I needed. And yet, underneath the guilt, there was something else too, an ache I couldn't name. I kept thinking about the way I'd looked in the mirror last night. Not just the sight of it, but the feeling. Like I'd touched a part of myself that had been waiting in silence for years, patient and invisible, until I finally gave it permission to exist. The day stretched on with unbearable slowness. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh, answered questions when asked, moved through the motions of being myself, except I couldn't shake the quiet hum beneath my ribs, the whisper of satin on skin that replayed itself like an echo. I kept wondering if I had imagined it all, if maybe the feeling was just in my head. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. By the time night came again, the slip was calling to me. I didn't even resist. When the house grew quiet, I pulled it out from my drawer, slipping it over my head with trembling hands. The relief that washed over me was immediate, almost dizzying. And this time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see a boy in borrowed clothing. I saw someone softer, someone braver, someone who was trying to tell me a truth I had been too afraid to hear. The reflection was a question mark. And I was terrified of the answer. The mirror became a place I both craved and feared. Each night I found myself standing before it again, the slip draped over me, my breath shallow as if the glass itself might judge me. I studied the angles of my face, tilting my head slightly, tucking my hair behind my ears, trying to imagine what it would be like if those edges were softer, if my features belonged to someone I had never allowed myself to meet. I didn't notice how much time I spent lost in those quiet rituals until one evening my sister knocked on my door. The sound jolted through me like an alarm bell, and I nearly tripped as I yanked the slip over my head, shoving it under the blankets. My heart thundered as I opened the door just enough to see her standing there, casual as ever, asking if I wanted the last slice of pizza. I managed to nod, forcing my voice steady, but I couldn't shake the thought. If she had knocked a minute earlier, she would have seen everything. That night, after I was sure everyone was asleep, I sat on the floor with the slip pulled around me and whispered to the fabric like it was an accomplice. Why do I feel this way? My words trembled, filling the quiet with something heavier than I had ever admitted to anyone. Why do I feel more like myself in you than I do in anything else I wear? There was no answer, of course, only the steady rhythm of my own breathing and the press of fabric against my skin. But in the silence, the question didn't feel foolish. It felt necessary. The next day, though, a subtle shift unsettled me. My sister held the slip in her hands while folding laundry, frowning at it for just a second longer than usual before tucking it away. I froze in the doorway, my stomach dropping. Did she notice? Did she know? I acted normal, at least I think I did, but the possibility gnawed at me. The idea of being discovered was terrifying, yet some hidden part of me wondered what it would be like not to hide. That thought alone scared me more than anything. Because once you imagine freedom, it becomes harder and harder to stay in the cage. Days passed, but the fear of being caught lingered in every glance, every sound of footsteps in the hallway. Still, I couldn't stop. At night I would slip into that satin embrace, the world shrinking until it was just me, the fabric, and the reflection in the mirror that seemed to whisper possibilities I couldn't yet say aloud. One evening, though, the temptation grew heavier. The slip was no longer enough. I found myself drawn to the dresser where my sister kept her other things, delicate tops, skirts folded neatly, the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the fabric. My hand hovered, trembling, before I dared to touch. A skirt, light and flowing, slid between my fingers like air. The weight of guilt pressed down even before I tried it on. But the moment I did, something inside me loosened. The way it swayed as I shifted, the way it framed me differently, made me feel like I was stepping into a life I had only ever glimpsed in dreams. I caught my breath, staring at my reflection with wide eyes. It wasn't perfect, not by any measure, But it was more than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. The fear came back sharp and sudden when I heard a voice calling from downstairs. My whole body froze, panic clawing at me as I yanked the clothes off, shoving them into their place with shaking hands. I nearly tripped racing back to my room, collapsing onto my bed with my heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. Lying there, sweat prickling at my skin, I realized two things. First, I couldn't keep doing this forever without being caught. Second, even if I wanted to stop, I wasn't sure I could. The longing had grown roots too deep. That night, instead of sleeping, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if what I was doing was simply curiosity or if it was something much bigger. Something I was too afraid to name. The next morning, when my sister brushed past me in the hallway, I caught myself wondering if she would ever understand. If anyone would. And for the first time, I wasn't only afraid of being discovered. I was afraid of never being seen at all. The days began to blur together, each one carrying the same secret rhythm. Pretending during daylight, unraveling at night. It was a strange double life, though no one else seemed to notice. At school, at the table, in conversations, I wore the version of myself everyone expected. Quiet, unremarkable, easy to overlook. But behind my closed door, a different self was waiting, trembling but alive, wrapped in satin and shadows. The contrast was exhausting. Smiles felt rehearsed, laughter hollow, every word I spoke painted over with the effort of distraction. And yet, the smallest moments kept me going. Catching a glimpse of myself twirling slightly in the mirror, brushing a strand of hair across my forehead as if it belonged there, running my fingers along the hem of fabric that told me I could be someone else, someone true. But the guilt never left me. Every time I touched my sister's clothes, I felt like an intruder in a life that wasn't mine. The thought twisted in me, sharp and relentless. I wanted so desperately to stop, to silence the voice that urged me forward, but whenever I promised myself it would be the last time, I always found my hands reaching again. Then one evening, everything almost unraveled. I was in my room, the slip draped over me, a cardigan from my sister's closet pulled tightly around my shoulders. I had just turned toward the mirror when the door creaked open. I spun so fast I nearly stumbled, shoving the cardigan under the blanket, heart leaping into my throat. But it was only my mom peeking in, her face soft with a distracted smile. "Dinner's ready, sweetheart," she said, not even glancing around the room, before closing the door again. The second the latch clicked, my knees gave out. I sank onto the bed, trembling so hard I could barely breathe. The brush with discovery left me shaken. But underneath the fear was something I couldn't deny, an aching wish that she had seen me, not by accident, but with understanding. The thought startled me so much I buried my face in the slip, whispering to the fabric as if it could answer the question I couldn't silence anymore. "Is this who I am?" The silence stretched, heavy but honest. And for the first time, I wasn't entirely sure I wanted the answer to stay hidden. After that close call with my mom, the air in my room felt different. Thicker, charged, like every secret was pressing against the walls. I tried to be careful, folding everything back perfectly, double-checking every drawer before leaving. But the truth was, I didn't want to be careful anymore. Every night I spent in those clothes, I felt a little braver, a little more desperate for something beyond hiding. One Saturday afternoon, when the house was empty, I let myself linger longer in front of the mirror. This time I didn't just slip into satin, I paired the skirt with a blouse, carefully tucking it in, brushing the wrinkles smooth with nervous hands. I stood there, staring, until the figure looking back at me wasn't just a boy in borrowed clothes. It was someone softer, someone tentative but real. I tilted my head, whispered aloud, "Who are you?" The sound echoed strangely, but it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a door creaking open wider than before. But freedom is fragile. That evening, while helping with dinner, my sister suddenly narrowed her eyes at me. "Hey, did you go into my room today?" she asked casually, but her tone carried weight. I froze, the wooden spoon in my hand trembling. "What? No. Why?" She shrugged, but her gaze lingered a moment too long. "Just thought some things looked different. Maybe I imagined it." Then she turned back to chopping vegetables, humming like nothing had happened. The relief washed over me, but it was thin, shaky. I knew it wouldn't last. She was noticing. The world was tightening its grip around my secret. That night, as I slipped into the satin again, it felt different. Less like a sanctuary, more like a risk. My hands trembled as I adjusted the hem, my reflection wavering in the mirror's glow. For the first time, The question wasn't what if they catch me, but what if I never tell them? Because hiding was becoming harder than confessing. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend to be only the person they thought I was. Sleep became restless, filled with dreams that blurred the line between fear and longing. In one dream, I walked into the kitchen wearing the satin slip openly, and no one looked twice. My sister laughed with me, my mom set down a plate of pancakes, my dad asked how I slept, and it all felt normal, natural, even. But then the dream shifted, their smiles hardened, and suddenly they were staring, their eyes sharp with confusion and disappointment. I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the echo of their imagined voices haunting me. The next morning I moved through the house like a ghost, replaying the dream over and over. Every time my sister glanced at me, I wondered if she suspected. Every time my mom asked me something simple, my throat tightened like I was about to confess. By evening, the weight of it was unbearable. I pulled the slip out again, sliding it over my body as though it might soothe me. But instead of comfort, I felt tears welling. I sat on the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, the satin pooling around me like a fragile shield. "What's wrong with me?" I whispered, the words cracking. "Why can't I just be normal?" The silence in my room offered no reply, but my reflection in the mirror looked back with a quiet ache that wasn't cruel. For the first time, I noticed something in those eyes, not weakness, but hunger. Hunger to be known. Hunger to be free. I stood shakily, wiping at my eyes, and reached for a brush on my dresser. I pulled it through my hair, slower than usual, watching as the strands fell differently, framing my face with a softness I hadn't let myself notice before. I didn't look like my sister. I didn't look like the girls at school. But I looked like someone who had been waiting for me to see them. The realization hit me hard. Maybe there wasn't anything wrong with me at all. Maybe what was wrong was how much I had been forced to hide. And once that thought took root, I knew something had to change. Change didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, like the way daylight stretches slowly across a dark room. I started paying closer attention to myself in ways I never had before. I stood longer in front of the mirror, studying not just the clothes I borrowed but the shape of my smile, the tilt of my head, the way my body moved when I let it soften. I brushed my hair differently, experimented with the way I held my shoulders, even adjusted the way I spoke to myself when no one could hear. It was subtle, but something in me was shifting. The boy I had been wasn't gone, but he no longer felt like the only truth of me. Underneath him was another voice, quieter, tentative, but insistent, like a melody finally cutting through static. One afternoon, when no one was home, I dared to take the next step. I slipped into the slip as usual, but this time I added mascara. My hands shook so badly that the wand nearly slipped, but when I blinked at the mirror and saw my lashes darker, framing my eyes differently, I nearly gasped. The change was small, almost laughably so, but it felt enormous. For the first time, the reflection looking back didn't just resemble me trying, it resembled me becoming. I wanted to stay there forever, but reality snapped back fast. A car door slammed outside, the sound of my sister coming home. I scrambled, scrubbing the mascara away with tissues until my eyes stung, tearing off the slip, shoving it into hiding. By the time she opened the front door, I was downstairs, pretending to watch TV. But the whole time she talked about her day, I barely heard her. My mind was still upstairs, locked inside that mirror, replaying the moment when I had finally seen myself as someone I had always been waiting to meet. The taste of it lingered like sugar on my tongue. Sweet. Addictive. Impossible to forget. And in that moment I realized, I couldn't go back. Not really. Not after catching even the faintest glimpse of who I might be. The next week was torture. Every ordinary moment felt heavier, like I was carrying an invisible weight no one else could see. At school, when friends joked or teachers lectured, I sat there nodding along, but inside I was somewhere else, back in my room, in front of the mirror, brushing mascara over trembling lashes. That tiny change had lit a spark I couldn't put out. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I didn't just want to borrow clothes. I wanted to live in them. I wanted to wake up and put them on without fear. I wanted the mirror version of me not just for stolen hours, but for every day. And the more I admitted that to myself, the more the cage I was living in felt suffocating. But then the fear always clawed back. What if they found out? What if they laughed? What if they couldn't love me anymore? The questions never stopped, and the answers never came. One evening, I came dangerously close to discovery again. My sister knocked on my door while I was brushing my hair in the slip, humming quietly to myself. I nearly leapt out of my skin, shoving the brush onto the desk and diving under the blanket like I was asleep. "Hey," she said through the door. "You okay?" I forced my voice to sound groggy. "Yeah. Just tired." There was a pause. I swear she lingered longer than usual before saying, "All right. Good night." Only after her footsteps faded did I let out the breath I'd been holding, my whole body trembling. The slip clung to me like a second skin, and for the first time, I realized how much I was risking. But here's the truth I couldn't shake. The fear of being caught was starting to feel smaller than the fear of never being seen. That night, staring at the ceiling, I whispered a promise to myself. I can't hide forever. The words felt terrifying. But also, for the first time, they felt like hope. The promise I made to myself echoed louder than I expected. All through the next day, it haunted me, not like a threat, but like a song I couldn't get out of my head. I can't hide forever. The more I repeated it silently, the more it changed from fear into resolve. But resolve without courage is like a locked door without a key. I didn't know how to take the next step. It was my sister who unknowingly gave me the chance. She left a shopping bag on her desk one afternoon, a new blouse she had bought. I walked past her room, glanced in, and froze. The fabric shimmered faintly in the sunlight, pale lavender, delicate but strong. My chest tightened. I couldn't resist. I waited until she was downstairs, then slipped in and lifted it gently from the bag. The blouse was light as air, softer than anything I'd ever touched. When I put it on, buttoning it carefully, I felt a shiver race through me. It wasn't just clothing. It was a revelation. The way the fabric lay across my shoulders, the way it framed my arms, the way the color lifted my face, it was like being introduced to a part of myself I hadn't known but instantly recognized. I stared at the mirror, lips parted, unable to breathe. For a moment, I forgot about fear. I forgot about being caught. I only knew the quiet surge of rightness that washed over me. But then I heard footsteps. My whole body seized. The blouse was still on me when the door creaked open an inch, and my sister's voice slipped in. "Hey, have you?" She stopped. Our eyes met in the mirror. Hers wide with shock. Mine frozen with terror. The silence between us stretched like glass about to shatter. And in that instant, I knew the hiding was over. Time didn't just slow, it stopped. My sister stood in the doorway, frozen, her hand still on the knob. I stood in front of the mirror wearing her lavender blouse, my reflection betraying every secret I had fought to hide. My throat went dry. I wanted to speak, to explain, but the words tangled in my chest. She blinked once, then again, her eyes flickering between me and the blouse. "You," her voice trailed off. For a moment, I braced for anger, for laughter, for the kind of cutting remark that would leave me hollow. But instead, she whispered, almost gently, "That's mine." I know," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. My hands fluttered uselessly at the fabric as if I could erase what she was seeing. "I'm sorry. I couldn't finish. My eyes burned, and I turned away, pressing my palms to my face. "Please don't hate me." The words spilled out before I could stop them, raw and desperate. There was a silence that felt endless, and then I heard her footsteps cross the room. She didn't yank the blouse off me, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she touched my shoulder, light as a feather. "I don't hate you," she said softly. I didn't know." I lowered my hands, blinking through tears. Her reflection stood beside mine now, our faces lined up in the mirror. She studied me quietly, her expression unreadable, then said, "You look different." "Not bad. Just different." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not rejection. Not acceptance either. Something in between. A door left open instead of slammed shut. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking. I don't know how to explain it. When I wear these things, I feel like me. Like the real me. Her eyes softened, though her brow furrowed with thought. "Why didn't you say anything?" I laughed bitterly, though it cracked. How could I? I didn't even understand it myself. She was quiet again, but her hand stayed on my shoulder, steadying me. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone in the secret anymore. That night, the air in my room felt completely different. Lighter somehow, though my nerves still trembled like glass about to crack. My sister had left after a long silence, saying only, "We'll talk tomorrow." I lay awake replaying every second of her expression in the mirror. First shock, then thoughtfulness, then something else I couldn't quite name. It wasn't rejection, and it wasn't exactly acceptance either. It was like she had seen me for the first time but didn't yet know how to process it. The morning came, and with it, my dread. At breakfast she sat across from me, sipping her tea, watching me in a way that made my skin prickle. But she didn't say anything, not in front of Mom and Dad. We passed the cereal box, clinked spoons against bowls, pretended nothing unusual had happened. The silence stretched, but beneath it was a current I couldn't ignore. Later, when we were alone, she finally spoke. "So," she began, arms crossed but not unkind, "are you going to tell me what that was about?" I swallowed, my throat tight. "I don't even know how to start." "Try," she said. Her tone wasn't sharp, it was patient, almost curious. That patience gave me just enough courage to exhale and whisper the truth. "When I wear your clothes, I feel like myself, more than I do any other time." She studied me, her eyes searching my face as though she was measuring the weight of my words. "So, it's not just a joke. Or, a phase." I shook my head, too quickly, too desperately. "No. It's not like that. I hesitated, my voice faltering. "It's who I am, I think. Even if I'm still figuring out what that means." Her arms loosened, her expression softening. She leaned against the door frame, sighing quietly. "You could have just told me, instead of sneaking around with my stuff." I was scared, I admitted, my cheeks burning. "Scared you'd laugh. Or hate me. Or worse." She tilted her head, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then, after a long pause, she said, "I don't hate you. I'm just surprised. But not in a bad way." The knot in my chest loosened. For the first time, the truth wasn't locked inside me anymore. It was out in the open, fragile but alive. And the way she looked at me, still my sister, but now something more, felt like the first step toward being seen. Over the next few days, everything felt different. My sister didn't bring it up right away, and I didn't push, but there was a quiet shift in the way she looked at me. Not suspicious, not judgmental, just watchful, like she was trying to piece together a puzzle. I caught her studying me sometimes, tilting her head the way she did when she was deep in thought. Finally, late one evening when the house was calm, she knocked on my door and stepped inside without waiting for me to answer. She was holding a small bag in her hands. "I thought about what you said," she began, her voice steady but softer than usual. She set the bag down on my desk and looked at me with a strange mixture of seriousness and warmth. "So I got you something." My heart jumped. What do you mean?" She nudged the bag toward me. "Open it." My fingers shook as I reached inside, pulling out folded fabric. Delicate, smooth, unmistakable. A camisole, pale cream with lace edging. My breath caught. "You bought this?" She nodded, watching my reaction closely. "It's yours. Not mine. You don't have to sneak around anymore. At least, not with me." I stared at her, words tangled in my throat. The camisole felt impossibly light in my hands, yet heavier than anything I'd ever been given. "Why would you do this for me?" She shrugged, though her eyes softened. "Because you're my sibling. And if this is who you are, then I don't want you to feel ashamed of it." My chest ached with gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. I pressed the fabric to my chest, blinking back tears. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice cracking. She smiled faintly. "Just promise me one thing. Don't destroy yourself hiding. If you're going to do this, then do it honestly. At least with me." That night, when I slipped into the camisole for the first time, it felt different from all the other times I had borrowed her clothes. This wasn't stolen. This wasn't borrowed. This was mine. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just pretending. I was beginning. The camisole became my secret treasure, folded carefully at the back of my drawer under a stack of plain t-shirts. But the secret wasn't crushing anymore. It carried a new kind of weight, hopeful, fragile, like the first sprout pushing through soil. Every night, after the house quieted and everyone drifted to sleep, I would slip it on. The fabric seemed to soften against me each time, molding itself to my body like it belonged there. Standing in front of the mirror, I traced the lace along my neckline with trembling fingers, whispering to my reflection as if trying to convince it that the person staring back was real. Some nights I smiled. Other nights I cried, unsure if I was brave enough to face the truth that shimmered in my chest. One evening, my sister walked in without knocking. I froze, caught in the middle of adjusting the camisole straps. My first instinct was panic, hands scrambling, body twisting, a muttered apology spilling from my lips. But she just raised an eyebrow and said, "Relax. I told you it's fine." I stopped, breathless, my hands hovering uselessly. I didn't think you'd come in." She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed but not unkind. "I wanted to see you. Like this. Not just hear about it." Her words made my heart stumble. I turned slowly toward the mirror, letting her see me fully. The camisole clung softly to my shoulders, my reflection fragile yet luminous under her gaze. She studied me with an expression I couldn't quite name, something between awe and concern. "You look happier. Different. Like it's really you." Hearing that from her cracked something open in me. A shaky smile tugged at my lips as tears threatened to rise again. "Do you really mean that?" She nodded. "Yeah, I mean it." For the first time, I felt like my reflection wasn't just mine anymore. It was shared, seen, acknowledged, and maybe even understood. And that made it feel more real than ever. After that night, something shifted between us. It wasn't spoken outright, but it lingered in the air like an invisible thread. Delicate, binding, undeniable. My sister no longer looked at me like I was hiding something. Instead, she watched me with quiet acceptance, like she was slowly learning a new version of me. One Saturday afternoon, while our parents were out, she tossed a bundle of clothes onto my bed. I looked down, confused. A soft cardigan, a pair of leggings, and a floral scarf. "Try them," she said casually, though her eyes flickered with anticipation. My heart hammered. "These are yours." "Not anymore," she replied with a faint smirk. "Consider them a loan. Training wheels." I laughed nervously. "Training wheels for what?" "For you. For this," she said, gesturing to me, to the space between us, to everything I had been too afraid to claim. I hesitated, then slowly picked up the cardigan, the fabric warm between my fingers. "You're really okay with this?" She sat cross-legged on my desk chair, chin resting in her hand. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. Just let me see you. For real." My chest tightened, but I obeyed. Piece by piece, I slipped into the clothes she had chosen. The leggings clung in a way that made me feel both exposed and held. The cardigan draped lightly over my shoulders, softening every angle. The scarf framed my face with colors I'd never dared to wear. When I finally turned to face her, her expression softened into something I had never seen before. "There you are," she whispered. The words echoed inside me, louder than my own heartbeat. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was dressing up as someone else. I felt like I was uncovering who I had been all along. I couldn't move at first. Her words, "There you are," hung in the air like a lantern, illuminating everything I had been too afraid to admit. My reflection no longer seemed like a secret fantasy. It looked like me. Not perfect, not polished, but truer than anything I had seen in that mirror before. My sister got up from the chair and walked closer, circling me slowly like an artist examining her work. "It's not about the clothes," she said softly. "It's about how you carry yourself in them. You're lighter, brighter, like the weight you've been dragging around finally slipped off." I bit my lip, my voice trembling. "Do you really think so? Or are you just being nice?" She met my eyes in the mirror. "You know me. I don't say things just to make people feel better. I say them when they are true." Her honesty made me tremble more than the clothes did. I had been waiting so long for someone, anyone, to confirm that what I saw in myself wasn't a delusion. And now, here she was. For the rest of the afternoon, we stayed in my room with the blinds drawn, creating a world that felt untouched by judgment. She showed me how to adjust the scarf so it draped better, teased me about how I fumbled with the cardigan buttons, and even offered me her lip balm just for a little shine. It wasn't much, but to me it felt monumental. Later, as I folded the clothes back up with shaking hands, she touched my shoulder and said, "You don't have to hide from me anymore. Not ever." I wanted to hug her, to pour out all the gratitude swelling in my chest, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just whispered, "Thank you." Because in that moment, those two words carried the weight of everything I couldn't yet say. The more time I spent with her like that, the harder it became to return to the version of myself the rest of the world knew. Each morning I put on my usual jeans and hoodies, but they felt heavier now, like armor I no longer wanted to wear. Underneath, though, I kept the camisole, my quiet rebellion, my hidden truth pressed against my skin. One evening, my sister leaned across the table while we were doing homework and asked, almost casually, "Do you ever think about telling anyone else?" My stomach dropped. "Like who?" She shrugged. "Friends. Maybe. Mom." The thought made me choke on the word before it even formed. No. God, no. She'd never understand. Her brow furrowed. "You don't know that." "I do," I said too quickly, my voice sharp. Then softer, ashamed. I'm not ready. I can't risk it." She studied me quietly, her pencil tapping against the page. Then she said, "Okay. But promise me one thing, don't bury this so deep it eats you alive. If you're not ready to tell anyone, fine. But don't lie to yourself about who you are. Not anymore." Her words clung to me long after. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the storm inside me. The fear of rejection battled with the longing to be seen. I pictured Mom's reaction, her sharp eyes, her practical voice, the way she expected order in everything. Would she see me as broken? Or worse, would she dismiss it as something childish, a phase to be disciplined away? The fear pressed down so hard that I wanted to fold myself into nothing. And yet, beneath it all, there was a whisper, soft, persistent, telling me that maybe, just maybe, my sister was right. That if one person could see me and not turn away, perhaps it was possible someone else could too. The next week felt like a test I hadn't studied for. Every time Mom glanced at me, I wondered if she somehow knew. If the camisole beneath my shirt was glowing through the fabric, if the softness in my posture had betrayed me. I laughed too loudly at her jokes, kept my eyes on my food at dinner, and retreated to my room as quickly as I could. But my sister noticed. One night, when I shut my bedroom door behind me, she slipped in a moment later. "You're jumpy," she said simply, folding her arms. "I'm fine," I lied, tugging at the hem of my shirt. "You're not," she countered. Then, softer, "Are you scared Mom's going to find out?" I froze. Her words pierced through me like a needle, leaving me exposed. "Yes," I whispered. She sighed and sat on the edge of my bed. "You can't live like this forever. I know you're not ready. But sooner or later, something will happen. Someone will notice. Wouldn't you rather it be on your terms?" Her question echoed inside me like a bell. My throat tightened, my chest aching. What if she hates me? She looked at me then, not as a sister teasing or lecturing, but as someone holding my heart in her hands. "Then I'll still be here. Always. But what if she doesn't? What if she loves you for exactly who you are, and you've been carrying this fear for nothing?" The possibility was too much. Too bright, too painful to consider. Tears blurred my eyes, and I shook my head. "I can't. Not yet." She didn't push. Instead, she wrapped her arms around me and let me cry against her shoulder. The cardigan she wore smelled like laundry soap and comfort, grounding me in a way nothing else could. And in that embrace, I realized something quietly terrifying. My fear wasn't just of rejection. It was of hope. Because if hope was real, then everything could change. The decision didn't come suddenly. It built like a tide, slow and relentless, each moment with my sister carving away a little more of the fear. One evening, while she was helping me adjust the scarf around my shoulders, I caught my reflection in the mirror and whispered, almost to myself, "I don't want to hide anymore." She froze, meeting my eyes in the glass. "Does that mean?" I nodded, my pulse racing. "I think I want to tell her." The words terrified me, but once they were spoken, they felt solid, like a truth that wouldn't let me retreat again. The next night at dinner, my hands shook so badly I could hardly hold my fork. My sister kept glancing at me, her silent encouragement wrapped around me like armor. Finally, when Mom asked how school was going, I set the fork down and blurted, "There's something I need to tell you." The table fell quiet. My father looked up from his plate. Mom's brow furrowed slightly, but her voice was steady. "What is it?" My throat nearly closed. My heart screamed at me to run. But then my sister's hand brushed against mine under the table, grounding me, reminding me I wasn't alone. I swallowed hard. "I've been hiding something. About who I am. About how I feel." My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. I feel more like myself when I wear different clothes. Clothes that aren't what you'd expect. Feminine clothes. The silence stretched unbearably. My chest burned. Mom set down her glass carefully, her face unreadable. My father shifted, clearing his throat. For a moment, I wanted to disappear. But then, Mom leaned forward, eyes fixed on me, and said softly, "You should have told me sooner." The room tilted. "You're not angry?" I stammered. She shook her head, her expression serious but not harsh. Surprised, yes. But angry? No. You're my child. That doesn't change. The tears came before I could stop them. My sister squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt, both of us clinging to the moment like it was a miracle. That night, for the first time, I went to bed not afraid of being found out, not drowning in shame. I lay there in the camisole my sister had given me, the fabric warm against my skin, and realized I was no longer hiding in the dark. I was stepping into the light. And though the road ahead was uncertain, for the first time in my life, it felt like it was mine to walk.